Welcome to MidLIFE Matters, where we celebrate women's wisdom and wit. I'm Georgian Lussier, your host, and I'm delighted to introduce today's guest, Melissa Sheffy. Melissa urges young people to seriously consider making a career in the construction industry. So welcome, Melissa.
Thank you.
After college, you took a secretarial job in a drywall company.
I did.
And we'll talk more about that whole progression, but today you own a construction firm.
I do.
Nice. What lessons do you pass along to young people about opportunities that await them in the construction industry?
I urge young people to consider careers in construction for a couple different reasons. The construction industry needs young people. We've had the economy a couple years ago did a tune on the industry, and people who were older were able to retire, and other people got out of the industry because there were no jobs. So we have a labor shortage, and anyone interested in a long-term career move, the construction industry would be a good choice. People tend to think about careers in construction as just jobs in the trades, swinging a hammer or a wrench or, plumber, electrician, carpenter. And what I tell people is the industry offers way more than that. I don't know a lot about residential construction. I'm a commercial contractor, and I think that commercial construction offers a lot. So if I speak to high school students and I tell them that if they're interested in working with their hands or learning something different, to consider construction. You can enter the trades, and I encourage everybody to enter the trades through the field. Even if you want to go to college and become an architect, engineer, or go for construction management, I urge people to get summer jobs at least for contractors working in the field, so you understand how the whole thing works. And then contractors promote from within. So if you start in the trades and you learn a trade and a skill, you typically, after putting in your time, you could learn how to be a foreman, and then you could learn how to be a project manager, or possibly an estimator, and get promoted and come into the office after years, of experience in doing that.
And what are some of the common misconceptions people have about the industry, about working with your hands and being in building?
Probably the most common one is that it's a fallback career, and it's not a career that people would do that have any sort of intelligence. That's the biggest misconception that I find. We build beautiful, ornate buildings, and you look around and you see these. You need really good math skills. You need to be very intelligent to be able to figure out these dimensions. For people to steer clear of the construction industry because they feel that it's a second choice or a fallback position is really too bad, because you can take great pride in passing a building that you worked on. Contractors say this all the time. You drive by a building that you worked on and everyone says, I did that, or I worked in that building. That's one of the reasons why I like it. My attention span isn't really super long, and so our jobs go from a month to 2.5 years. And so then you're on to another building. You're on to another project. So you can drive by that building and it'll be there forever, and everybody had a hand in it. And the other thing is it's a real team approach. Subcontractors all work together under one contractor or one owner, and you're all working together to perform your task to get it done.
And women in construction, let's talk about that. What are the opportunities? What are some perceived barriers?
The opportunities, again, I'm always pushing young people to get into the trade aspect, meaning go to learn a skill and enter the trades through the field, meaning actually going out to learn how to be a plumber, electrician, HVAC person, carpenter. Even if you think you want to be, again, an architect or an engineer, the construction trades in commercial need women and minorities. And women are considered minorities in the commercial field. We all have affirmative action requirements and CHRO requirements for certain projects if you're working on a public job, and we have to fill certain percentages of women and minorities per trade classification. So I tell women, young women all the time, if you're not sure about what you want to do and you don't mind working hard and learning something, and the hours can be tough and it's cold in the winter and hot in the summer, but if you're willing to put up with all that, you could have a very lucrative long-term career because, I don't think women and young girls actually understand that they have a place and there's a need for that. We find more women entering the industry on the professional end, architect, engineer, construction management, which is fine too. I mean, there's a need for that as well. I personally think that, we should fill all those positions with a lot of women, but it is a male-dominated industry right now. But we definitely have a need for women in the trades in the field. So if people aren't sure what they want to do, they really should look at that as a viable career move to see if it's something that they're interested in.
And are there physical requiremits that might be a barrier for some women?
Yeah, I mean, it is, there, depending on what trade you choose. I mean, it could be, but, women tend to be in pretty good shape, or they're come in all different sizes, so there's something for everyone in that regard.
And I know you mentioned that in the commercial world, which is what you're most familiar with, they do
Right.
tend to promote from within,
Yes.
right? So the idea that you have of people trying the construction experience, maybe take a summer job?
Yes, I encourage students who aren't sure what they want to do to get a job in the summer, even if you can, for a contractor or, someone that would be willing to give you a job temporarily for summer help, to just see how things work from the field and see how things look from the field. There are so many careers that somebody could take, a career path in construction, that I guarantee most students and young people don't know exist. So I encourage people to just get out there and see what's there. You have to be 18 to be on a commercial construction site with the Connecticut Department of Labor laws. If someone does register you as a pre-apprentice and actually signs you up with the DOL, you can come on board at a 16-year-old if a company will do that. So it's possible, and companies would have to be willing to do that, but really 18 is the legal,
Okay.
safe age for someone to come on board.
And you have a story of a young woman who thought construction wasn't in her venue of choice because she was planning to be, I think, an engineer.
Right.
You want to share what?
I speak a lot at high schools trying to encourage people to get into the trades, again, because the industry needs young people. And I for some reason, society has gotten away from promoting their children and young people to enter the trades, despite the fact that our grandfathers and great-grandfathers all, pretty much worked in the trades and were proud of it. So everyone's pushing colleges now, and I think that's great, and college is very important, but it's not for everyone. And even people who have gone to college, and graduated who still can't get a job might want to consider, getting a job in construction. But aside from that, I speak a lot at the high schools to get people to consider the industry. And one time I was speaking to a high school class, and one of the girls wasn't paying attention to me at all. But she was in the construction division, or the tech ed wing. And I was calling her out and trying to get her to pay attention to me, and she just wasn't. And finally I just said, are you interested, or something like that. And she just said, not really, because I'm interested in engineering and that has nothing to do with what you're talking about. And so I looked at the teacher and we both laughed, and I said, actually, depending on what type of engineering you want to get into, it actually does have a lot to do with what I'm talking about. And so in that way, young people make me laugh because they don't really understand, and that's why I put myself in front of these classes and try and talk to people about, if you like numbers but you're not sure if you want to be an accountant, there's estimating and there's construction accounting, and people don't realize that construction has its own construction law, and if you like numbers but you're not crazy about engineering, you can get into estimating. Or you can be a very highly intelligent person and not want to sit in a classroom or an office and go to work in the field and work with your hands and have a viable career that way too. So if you start in the field, you could easily come into the office after a couple of years and eventually be an owner.
And with the emphasis for women, young women, to get into what is called STEM, right? The science and technology and math, and I mean, it's just such a nice dovetail that maybe a lot of people don't connect those dots because they tend to think of maybe information technology
Right.
and maybe bioengineering and, different fields, healthcare, whatever, but
Right.
certainly, yes.
I'm glad you brought that up, because STEM definitely encompasses the construction industry and trades. And I'm not sure if a lot of adults actually understand that. So I'm not sure if students do. It's science, technology, engineering, and math.
Right.
And all of those things, can be intertwined.
And they're needed. I mean, you look at a building, how does it come to be?
Absolutely. It's a
Yeah.
giant team effort
Yes.
of architects, engineers, contractors, all working together.
And I know you serve as a public member on the Connecticut Plumbing Board,
I do.
and you're involved in continuing education for the trade. So let's talk about that a little bit. So let's say that someone has made a choice and is in the construction industry, and now what role does continuing education play? And if you could just talk a little bit about what it's like you're probably the only woman, I would think, on the Connecticut Plumbing Board, right?
No, actually, I'm not.
Oh, well, tell me about that.
I serve with a friend of mine, Joyce
Nice.
Topsy. Yes.
Wonderful.
Who actually, Joyce was nominated first and was appointed first. And at the time, apparently Jody Rell was our governor and was looking to put women business people on various boards, which was very forthcoming of her. And Joyce recommended me.
Nice.
So, yeah, she's been a friend of mine for years, and she actually is the VP of Facilities at Wesleyan University. So it was
Nice.
good because we bring different backgrounds to the plumbing board. And we're not plumbers. We are both public members.
Right.
So it's interesting because people say to me when I first got on the board, they're like, what do you know about plumbing?
You're like, I'm learning.
Exactly.
I'm learning as we go.
Exactly, and that's what it was. I got to a point in my career where Joyce had recommended me, and I was like, what? And so I thought about it, and I thought, well, I don't know anything about plumbing. I want to learn, and I don't know anything about licensed trades, and I want to learn. And that's kind of how I got where I am when I had taken my job right out of college. I am where I am because I wanted to learn. And as I tell the high school students, the more you learn, the more you earn. Essentially,
Nice.
it's very basic. And I don't think even at this age I'm done learning, and so.
Oh, absolutely not. And that's
Right.
what this show is all about. We get
So
into our
that's
zenith
why
years.
I joined
Yeah.
that board. And continuing education, I'm very passionate about. And I tell parents and students that I talk to all the time, just because you don't choose college doesn't mean that you don't continue your education. If you get into the licensed trades in Connecticut, it is a 4-year, well, typically, depending on what trade you enter. There's a formal education piece, and then there's the on-the-job training piece. But the greatest part about that is that instead of, if you don't want to go to college, someone else is typically paying, and you're getting paid while you work. So you earn while you work. And I am the chair of the board of the Construction Education Center, and that's where we do apprenticeship training and continuing ed and professional development for construction industry, for the construction trades. So I'm very passionate about that. I think that education comes in a wide variety of menu options, and there's definitely educational opportunities in construction.
And I think many people are unaware that many of the licensed trades are having very formal continuing education requirements in terms of units of hours of study.
Yes,
Over
absolutely.
a period of time. Yes.
Yeah, so it's a formal education, and it's important because laws change, codes change, and everybody needs to keep up with that. And it's interesting because in my experience with the plumbers now, you have a lot of respect. Everybody has a lot of respect for their doctors, but they really should have a lot of respect for their plumbers too, because it's your water supply and your med gas when you're being put under for surgery and things like that. So those have to be put in by licensed people, and it's a very important and highly regulated profession.
Yes. And I believe that safe water is one thing that differentiates third world countries from it, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, Georgian.
Showing a little
That's
bit
true.
of my plumbing
You are,
family
your vast
background there.
knowledge.
Okay. And in terms of the commercial industry, you talked about it having very stringent requirements regarding safety.
Yes.
I imagine, speak about some of the other things that the commercial people have to pay attention to that you're aware of in terms of training and,
Well, I'm a product of commercial construction, so I'm not that knowledgeable with residential. So I'll
Right.
speak to what I know.
Speak to commercial,
essentially.
absolutely.
We are very highly regulated as far as safety
Mm-hmm.
goes. I mean, at OSHA, we're all fully in PPE, meaning personal protective equipment. So hard hats, safety glasses, long pants, shirts with sleeves, safety vests, high vis, things like that. And all for good reasons, because people were getting hurt before. So it's very common to have OSHA regulations and, Connecticut OSHA, and contractors have their own safety plans and things like that. Which is another thing, if anybody's interested in safety or risk management, you don't need to get in the insurance industry, because there's a whole career for you in commercial construction as a safety manager, safety officer, risk management, the insurance, construction has their own insurance people for that. So again, those are just other viable careers. But we have, the licensing for the trades is across the board in the state of Connecticut, regardless of whether you're a commercial contractor or residential. But typically, the inspections in the bigger buildings and things like that are pretty highly focused
Yes.
as far as things like that go.
Yeah, they
So we
take
are
on
we are
higher
pretty much under the
requirements.
microscope to make sure that everything gets done according to the book.
And so if I understand it correctly, you went from, let's talk about your career path a little bit, and then how you were influenced by your family in terms of how you are, where you are. So you started as a secretary.
Yes.
And then,
What happened was I graduated from college. I have a business degree. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, so I got a degree in business because that's my passion, it seems. I think like that. I'm a numbers person. And I could not get a job when I graduated. I went to school in Pittsburgh, and I graduated just about the time the steel mills were laying off. And I was a college grad with a degree with no experience, and I was competing against people with 30 years of experience from, the steel mills. So my roommate from college had moved up here and said, "Oh, come on up to Connecticut. There's jobs up here." So I did, and I thought I'll drive up and see what happens. So I got a job right away as a secretary at a drywall company. And during my interview, they asked me why I would want to be the secretary, because I had a college degree. And I said, because I need a paycheck, and I want to pay my rent, and I want to live on my own. So they kind of laughed, but they're like, "Okay, you can be our secretary." So a couple months into that, I think it was about 6 months later, the bookkeeper left. And I asked if I could do that job, and they were like, "What do you know about being the bookkeeper?" And I'm like, "I have a college degree. I could figure this out." So they did. They taught me how to do the payroll and the billings and things like that. And then a friend of mine was estimating, and she taught me details and how to do takeoffs and things like that. And at the time, I didn't realize that I was learning each department of a construction company or a drywall company. I just did it because I wanted to know. I wanted to learn. And I tell the students that I speak to in the classrooms that I just needed a job. So stop waiting for the ultimate job, or the job that, I hear so much now. Kids will say, "Well, I don't know what makes me happy. I want to do a job that makes me happy." And you know what I tell them? That's a hobby. That's not a job. A job is go get a paycheck. So if you're looking for something that makes you happy, you'll probably find it if you start walking through the door. So anyway, basically, again, back to the more you learn, the more you earn. I was learning all different facets of different divisions of a company because I just wanted to know. And so what happened was I did end up taking, years later, all the experience that I learned and started my own company.
putting it together. Wonderful. Now, let's talk a little bit about your background. I know that your parents were very involved in their community, and you're very involved in your community.
I am.
And so talk about some of the community activities. You've been the president of the Y?
Yes, but first, can I just say, I have the
Yes.
most awesome family on the planet, and I
Yes,
don't
definitely.
say that sarcastically.
Mm-hmm.
I have wonderful parents who I credit pretty much most of who I am to how they raised me, and a brother and sister, and I have a very close family of network of everybody. But my parents encouraged us always. I grew up in a very small town in Pennsylvania, and my parents are still alive today. And they encouraged us to get involved and be active in the community. And when you grow up in a town of 800 people, everybody knows everyone, and pretty much everyone does everything and helps each other out. And so my dad was the local funeral director, and my mom was the school nurse, and eventually, stayed home to raise us. And very active in the community, and my dad always taught us that if you take care of your employees, they'll take care of you. And I've found the many lessons my parents have given me to be right on accurate. And I have a wonderful staff who currently works for me. I have 55 employees right now, and I have a really great team, a great giant family, I should say. And I'm fortunate that my parents are still around. My brother and sister are still, very close with me. And my brother, sister, and I are very active in our communities. And I just finishing up my past president of the board of directors of the Southington Cheshire YMCA. And I've served on various committees there and other places. My church, I'm active in the church, not as active as I used to be. Finishing up, Southington just built 2 middle schools, renovated as new. Came in under budget and on time.
Nice.
So that was, so in between that and just lots of other smaller committees, I do believe in giving back. And I recently just signed up for Mains in Motion, which I'm
Yes.
very excited about. I get my training in December.
And that's the Hospital for Special Care's own
It is.
enterprise there for children, veterans, anyone who can benefit from.
Yes, and I'm very excited about that. I'm passionate about horses and helping people, so that'll be fun.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you. So you have a very positive theory of life, I guess I would say.
Thank you.
Right? Stay positive, give back. And what advice might you give to your younger self?
Probably to never say never, because it will happen. And to go with my gut. Anytime I've ever gone against my gut, I've regretted it. But pretty much to just go with my gut. And to just remind my younger self that, as I tell younger people or tell people, that as my dad had and my parents had taught me, that you're not entitled to anything. I'm not sure why society now thinks they're entitled to everything, but they're not. The only thing that you're entitled to is an opportunity, and that's it. And whatever you do with that opportunity is up to you. That's pretty much it.
Okay. Well, thank you. This has been absolutely terrific. I'd like to close with a quote, and it's from George Eliot, who had to use a man's name, Mary Ann Evans. She was a novelist back in the 1800s. And she said, "What do we live for if it is not to make life less difficult for each other?" I think that embodies a lot of what your management philosophy, your community involvement, and your commitment to really helping people find exciting careers in the construction industry.
Thank you.
So thank you very much. Please tune in to hear other fascinating women on future segments of MidLIFE Matters. Your host, Georgian Lussier. Thanks for tuning in.